I know.
Good morning, everyone. This is Stephanie
Okay.
Halko. We'll get started in just one moment. Thank you.
Bye.
Demand and demand. Good.
10 o'clock, what's wrong?
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to the July version of the AMA call. This is Stephanie Halko here with Treasurer Folwell. Glad you all could join us this morning. I just wanted to ask a quick question. If you're not asking a question, would you mind putting your phones on mute? We've got a little background noise this morning. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Treasurer Folwell for some introductory comments, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you for joining me. Obviously, June and July are very busy months at the Treasurer's Office. Most of you have been reading reports in the national media about the likelihood that we're going to face 10,000 people reaching the age of 65 every day for a long period of time. If you take the byline of that story, you can only imagine that that's impacting the retirement system of North Carolina. Very pleased to report that we just got our benchmarking in, and we've exceeded which means that's a good thing, the amount of time that we were benchmarked against in terms of turning retirement papers around on behalf of hardworking state and local employees. Secondly, we have exceeded our benchmark in terms of collecting money, the people that owe money to the retirement system. And lastly, in terms of our peer group, we're administering, this does not include Wall Street fees, I don't think, but I'll correct that if I need to. This we're administering this system at a cost of about $23 per participant, and our peer group is $92 per participant. So we're glad to report that. The next week is going to be some very big things that are going to be announced out of the Treasurer's Office. And with that, I'll open up for questions.
Who'd like to go ahead and ask a question?
This is Michael Abramowitz with the Daily Reflector.
Hey, Michael.
Hello, Treasurer Folwell. I hope you're doing well.
Yes, good to hear from you.
So, in June, you spoke via phone conference during a meeting with Biden and ECU board members. You know, they're known as VECU, overseeing the transition of ECU physicians and state employees to the new private physician management system. Essentially, you asked them why they had not signed a joint letter as originally agreed to request outside tax counsel regarding the transition and the potential impacts of the proposed merger on the employee's tax-exempt status. So the next day, you confirmed that ECU officials had, after a lengthy delay, agreed to sign a joint letter requesting that outside tax counsel. My question is, was the letter actually signed, and what has transpired on this matter since then?
Great question, Michael. And for the rest of the people on the call, VICU, as Michael pointed out, is a combination of Vidant Hospital and ECU Physicians, which is a taxpayer-owned asset. The issues that are before us, as far as VICU, which is what they call the combined entity, is how do you have a non-governmental entity, Vidant, have employees who participate in a governmental ERISA pension plan. So we, number one, so we are seeking tax counsel, and to put a little more sharper point on your pencil, Michael, the letter that they did not sign is the one that they drafted, they typed out, and they even put a line in there for their own signature, and they wouldn't sign it. That's why it led to me making those remarks at the VICU meeting. So they did sign it that night. Since they've signed that letter has gone off to the tax counsel, and we're in weekly or bi-monthly conversations with the tax counsel, our counsel, the Attorney General's office, and the counsel at VICU to make sure that whatever the tax council opines on, that it's accurate. The second part of VICU is what happens to the long-term health care and benefits of people who are vested in this, not only state health plan, but the state pension plan. The third thing about VICU is the bonds, tens of millions of dollars worth of bonds that the Treasurer's Office has issued on ECU physicians or some related entity, and what the impact that will be on the bondholders who think and thought these were the full faith and credit of North Carolina. So, to kind of put a bow on all that, Michael, the Bond Council is in the final innings of giving its opinion about the bondedness, the bonds that have been issued by ECU physicians over the decades before. They're still working with these employees in terms of what happens in their, for retirement and health care. And the letter that was the basis of your original question was sent to tax counsel in D.C., and they're working on that, and we're in communication at least every week with the VICU people, and we should expect a response back to that letter sometime between now and Labor Day.
I only have one follow-up question, Mr. Folwell. Is there a time, considering that they have set a deadline for completing this transition process and to begin the new system, management system, January 1st, is there a timetable of planned steps to resolve these open questions and issues? And have they begun to work with you and your office on getting these things resolved to meet this deadline?
They do until they don't. And quite frankly, all of these deadlines and all of these issues should have been resolved long before I was either elected or even sworn in to be the state treasurer in North Carolina. This has been going on for well into Treasurer Cowell's administration also. So I'm the one who is driving to Greenville. I'm the one who is telling my staff that whatever these issues are, whether there's agreement or disagreement, or tax council said this is not possible, we need to have a big goal and short deadlines, not little goals and long deadlines. So related to this, we want to get it resolved but at the end of the day, this is an asset that the taxpayers have paid for, and I'm doing everything that I told them that I would do, and we're doing everything that was in the memorandum of understanding that I shared with you that both parties signed about 3 months ago.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate your interest, and thanks for joining the call.
I'm still here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Hazel, do you have a question?
I have several.
Okay.
Based on what you just said, good morning, Treasurer.
Hey,
The peer group cost, is that, did it start up higher, closer to the peers, and you got it way down? And if so, how did you do that?
the peer group cost as far as administration of the DB plan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it's always been a good number, and
Okay.
I'm embarrassed that I can't tell you if it includes Wall Street fees. I'm just doing the calculation in my head of 893,000 people times $23, and I don't think that adds up to $600 million of Wall Street fees. I just think it's administrative cost. So they've done a very good job. Obviously, as we continue to run an efficient operation, and we have more people in the system or more retirees in the system, then obviously with that numerator-denominator effect, it has a possibility of lowering that cost per participant. Those fixed costs are spread out among more people. So I'm not going to sit here and everything that we do at the Treasurer's Office, there's brains behind all this stuff, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's dramatically changed under my administration, but it's just we want to have an efficient operation. We want to have an operation that is timely, and we want to have an operation that gives quality information to these folks who, behind their faith and behind their health and behind their friends and family, this is the most important thing that will ever happen to them in their life, is the decisions they make when they retire. And being able just to do that, not just on a timely basis, but with the utmost amount of quality so that they make the right decisions for them individually, is very important to us.
And how did you get the cost reduction for the planning tool?
The Goal Maker tool?
Yeah.
We did that in a couple of different ways. Number one, we were able to, the plan has more passivity than it used to. And I was told last night in a meeting that, people want to quit hearing me talk about basis points. They won't hear me talk about actual dollars. So, but a lot of that had to do with the consolidating of fund managers, number one, taking advantage of our largeness, because as you consolidate, if you end up giving more assets to one other person, another manager, then our fees go down. And then the other part is passivity, and the other part of this is that we have managers who understand where we're headed as far as fees with the defined contribution and the defined benefit plan, and we have people who are very interested in partnering with us to lower fees without me having to ask them for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And I wanted to introduce my new colleague, Brian Croce. He's on the call and still on an unlearning curve, but interested in how the public system, how the public pensions work and what the issues are.
Welcome, Brian. You got big heels to fill.
Well, I'm not going away.
Okay.
And thank you.
I knew that would get a response from you, Hayden.
And we have to come down and visit soon, too. So that was one final question is, when is a good time for us to come visit? Any particular meetings that we should aim for? But it's not my last question today. I just didn't want to hog the whole call.
Frank and my chief of staff will get back with you, and we'll, the R in the word grace stands for radical hospitality, and that's the way you'll be treated when you arrive.
And you also mentioned something about the legislative session that just ended. Was there anything else there that you had asked for or not asked for, or that was worth noting at this point?
Well, we're very excited about the solvency fund. We feel like, contrary to, we feel like it's one of the, if not one, the first one of its type in the country. And Michael's closer to that part of North Carolina than we are in Raleigh, but there's a term, Hazel, around our military communities called II, and a lot of people have heard it all their life, but very few know what it means. It means, I hear you, I understand what you're saying to me, and I'm going to do something about it. That's what the term II literally means. And so the solvency fund was an II for me to the rating agencies that says that we hear what you're saying about unfunded liabilities, we understand what you're telling us, and we're doing something about it. So having a solvency fund is very exciting for us, and the solvency fund basically has some spigots that it can get money out of so that we can start defeasing or paying down our $50 billion worth of IOUs. We have, as you know, about $35 billion IOU for the state health plan, because promises were made to state employees to be eligible for lifetime health care, and no money was ever put aside for that for the last 40 years. And we have a $15 billion unfunded pension liability, even though it's one of the best funded pension plans in the United States. The pension liability is growing, will grow over the next few years by billions of dollars, and it's mathematical. The pension plan has not earned its assumed rate of return on average for the last 20 years. It is not expected to over the next 20 years, even though we just lowered the assumed rate of return. So the solvency fund is something we're very proud of, and as we have been in talks with the rating agencies over the last 4 weeks, and the reason I'm saying that is that, and this it pertains to Michael and Dan and some others on the call, we're getting ready to go to market with our second tranche of the Connect NC bonds, and obviously you have to get a rating on those bonds before the people invest in them. So we're very excited about the Solvency Fund. We got some other things done. There are some things that we're trying to do inside the defined benefit plan that we think are going to add to the long-term sustainability of the plan. But basically, it just comes down to we have a lot of things inside this defined benefit plan, and for those that have not been on the call very much, in the first 6 months of this year, gross, we have paid out $3.4 billion in benefits, gross. We have probably paid out over $300 million in Wall Street fees. Our earnings are basically flat for the first 6 months. So when you're dealing with those kinds of numbers, it's important that we focus on making sure that we're doing everything we can so that the plan is not paying out Wall Street fees it shouldn't, not paying members that it shouldn't, not giving people pension credit because they commit crimes while on their public service duties. Some of these are pennies and some of them are paper clips and some of them add up to millions and millions of dollars. So we still have a long way to go about that, but as I've said before, as long as I'm the treasurer of North Carolina, I'm focused on preserving and strengthening, but I have to figure out a way to sustain this defined benefit plan, because even though it's one of the 5 best funded in the United States, it has some real headwinds in front of it.
And what more will you be trying to accomplish on the fee issue this year?
Well, by the end of this year, including the fixed income, we will be approaching nearly 50% of our assets will be managed in-house. That's about $50 billion. That's about $35 billion in fixed income, where we have 4 people that have the director and also co-chief investment officer has been there for 26 years. And of course, we have the in-house index product. We think that the $15 billion on the in-house index product, all in, including subscriptions and Bloomberg machines and salaries and compensation, we think we're going to be managing that $15 billion for an all-in cost of less than $400,000 a year. $500,000 a year would be safer to say. So we continue to make strides on this. Everybody knows what we're trying to do, and it looks like from reading your magazine, Hazel, that the world is coming our way regarding these issues.
Gotten calls from other systems saying, how did you do it?
No, I don't get any calls from anybody, actually. This is why I do this call with you guys every month, because it's the only interaction I have with people is to have me ask me anything.
The outside world.
Yeah, but I'm like the Maytag repairman, and you know, some of you are old enough to know what that means, and others of you will say, well, what does that mean? So anyway, you know, we're just trying to, as the poet T.S. Eliot once said, the philosopher, I guess, hell's where nothing connects. Everything that we ever do to lower fees, make sure that we're doing something about our unfunded liabilities, trying to maintain a AAA bond rating, keeping the interest rates that the government state pays for debt at issues, all this connects back to something else in the Treasurer's office.
Well, Treasurer Folwell, this is Dan Way, and
Yeah.
I have a question. In a few minutes, the governor will be making an appearance at a Raleigh Elementary School, at which he's expected to advance the need for a statewide school construction bond. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on another bond coming out, whether, first of all, the state should be doing school construction, which historically has been more of a county level function, and on the heels of this $3 billion transportation bond that just, passed, are we going to be biting off more than we could chew if we do a school construction bond? And whether you have any final thoughts on that $3 billion transportation bond?
Well, my final thoughts are reflected in what I put out in the press release, and that is that I'm in favor of transportation. I'm in favor of those that advocate for transportation. But as the keeper of the public purse and the state treasurer, I felt very strongly that any time that you're going to increase the state debt by maybe 40%, that the people that you're increasing that debt on the backs of need to have a say in that. The voters, I don't recall, I'm 60 years old and I don't been alert all that time, by the way. I don't recall any time where the voters have turned down a transportation bond in this state. The other two things that I called for regarding the Build NC was that it have transparency and it goes through a normal appropriation sunshine process that reflected the priorities that had been previously set for how transportation spending was going to happen in North Carolina. So the second thing was to make sure it went through the appropriation process, and the third thing, and then the first thing was that it be voted on and by the people. The third thing was that it not violate the debt affordability study. I think that when you look at the debt affordability study, which I'm required by statute to present to the General Assembly and the governor on February 1st of every year, you can see where, especially with rising interest rates, you can see where we need to be very careful about the amount of debt this state takes on going forward. And I'll remind you, and nobody on this call needs to be reminded of this $50 billion of unfunded liabilities is debt. It's debt because we're on a pay-go basis, and the amount of money that I send the General Assembly a bill for every year for health care and pension costs is going up dramatically. And all that has to be taken into context, and that's why as state treasurer, I was the first state treasurer to ever put these liabilities into the debt affordability study to see what our potential was. School construction and finding a way to do school construction, and especially in rural depopulating parts of North Carolina, is vitally important. But it has to be done with the understanding that we don't have, unlike the federal government, we do not have an unlimited credit card.
We have the capacity to take on another massive bond like that.
Well, I have to go back and recalculate that, and the reason is that there were never any real details provided on Build NC. I don't know if there's anybody on this call who can tell me what the projects are and when they're expected to be let out. So when you issue the debt, obviously makes a difference in how much debt you can issue while you're waiting to issue the debt. But I would just like everybody on the call who has an interest in this to understand, we are going to market next week with only the second piece of the Connect NC bond. That bond was approved by the voters in 2016. And my point of saying that to you is that anytime anybody talks about debt and building of anything, sometimes they talk about it, but they operationalizing it to make sure that the money is there, that the projects are ready to go, and whatever it is we're building or improving on is ready to go is very important, because we are just not in a position to be issuing debt and having the money lying around waiting for somebody to get their ducks in a row. So very important issue.
All right, thank you.
Does anybody else have any additional questions this morning?
I had a question about the solvency fund. What's your timeline for? I mean, this was something you had to get legislative approval because they have to authorize the money, right? Or
Yes.
taking the money.
Yes. Well, we are putting together. We currently have $1 billion in reserves in the state health plan. We're working on an analysis currently about how many days or weeks of money we actually need as a. Yeah. I'm trying to get staff to look at our state health plan as like any executive would look at a standalone insurance company, because that's really what it is. It's a standalone insurance company, and we have to manage it that way. So I want to be very prudent, because I was actually in the legislature when the state health plan, which I believe at the time was spending $25 million a day, we were down to less than 2 days reserves. So I want to make sure that the first piece of money that we put into the solvency fund, that we do it with an understanding that we have reserves sitting there, to pay out claims. But, we hope to be building reserves. The state pension plan is 90% funded on average. The state health plan is 3% funded. We have 90% of what we need on the pension plan to pay benefits. We have 3% of what we need on the state health plan. So to answer your question more directly, Hazel, there are things administratively that we can do as far as putting money in the solvency fund. Obviously, any spigot that's opened into the solvency fund, from surpluses, from windfalls to the state government, to just general appropriations, all that stuff has to be legislatively done. But we have opportunities to put things to get the solvency fund actually funded. It's one thing to have a solvency fund; it's another thing to actually fund it. And we don't care too much about the noun around here, the N-O-W-N. We're very much about the verb. So having a fund, which is a noun, is one thing, but actually funding it is what we're focused on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Hazel. Do we have any other questions? Okay, we'll turn it back over to the treasurer for a few final comments.
Listen, thank you for your interest. We do this call once a month for lots of different reasons, but the main and most important reason is this is what I told you I would do. I get remarks all over the place of, you mean you go on a 1 hour call and you don't know who all the participants are going to be, and you don't know what the questions are. And so these calls are, number one, an acknowledgement of what I told the voters and the members of the media that we would do in terms of the transparency of this office, and this is just a reflection of how we treat all of you on all subjects. Number two, but it really it makes us sharp, and it makes us sharp in the sense that it's humbling, and it's the correct thing when one of you asks us a question and we don't know the answer to, and that's okay with us. We can't know the answers to all the questions, but we appreciate our staff. I appreciate our staff putting this call together every month. I appreciate you folks taking an hour out of your schedule to come onto the call, and we appreciate not only the local and the statewide, but also the national and, in the past, some of the international press. We're trying to lead on these issues. And as I've relayed to many of you privately and on this call, this is sort of like a scene out of the Monuments Men, that we think that the state health plan and the state pension plan and the defined contribution plan are treasures. No pun intended for the treasurer. But we think these are treasures. And we're trying to figure out how to preserve and strengthen them and sustain them. And the reason that's important to me is that while we're on this call, there's someone out there that's using their hand, their back, their feet, obviously their mind and their heart, and they're educating our kids.